I'm so completely pleased and honored to be here tonight. I believe this might be a decade now. Oh, and there's Dean and Gloria. I'm so glad you're here too. The founder and the visionary of the sanctuary and his mom over there. So it really is a deep honor to be here tonight. We've been able to be part of this event and to support Karen, who we are eternally grateful for. You know, she's been dedicated to bringing this conference here for over a decade. And we've been able to support her during this time. And for about the last 6 or 7 years, I've actually been able to sit and talk and be part of the amazing lineup at this conference. I mean, it still stuns and amazes me that I am sharing a stage with Greg Braden and Deborah Rosman and Greg Braden and Joe Dispenza. It's mind-blowing. I mean, it's mind-blowing. And I shared this story last year, but I really want to share it again this year because it has such deep meaning for me. And it really epitomizes the synchronicities that are alive and well, and how guided I've been in my own life, and I know all of you are guided in yours. About 2000, I'm going to say 2004, I was living in San Francisco, and I was married, and I was practicing law, and I was going through what I would call my first real spiritual awakening. You know, kind of looked a little bit like a nervous breakdown, but I'm going to call it a spiritual awakening. And I was getting a lot of help during that time, and I was seeing a Jungian psychoanalyst at the time, and she had recommended a book. It was in Berkeley, and I went to, I believe it was the Barnes & Noble there in Berkeley to get this book. And I was in sort of the psychology section, and I couldn't find it, And I'm not exaggerating at all or telling a lie when I tell you that I'm standing there looking for a book, and a book comes flying off of the shelf and literally hits me. And it was a little surprising because there was no one else in the aisle, and I picked up this book, and it was this kind of beautifully small book, and it was a book called The Secrets of the Lost Mode of Prayer by Greg Braden. And I had never heard of Greg Braden, and I found that really interesting, and I really wasn't aware of synchronicities at the time, but that was curious enough to go ahead and buy that book. And I will never forget, I was in my office in San Francisco reading the book, and I had a real aha moment, like a true download, where all of a sudden in this split second, I understood that this world I was living in wasn't just cause and effect. Like I got it on some level. I didn't know the word quantum yet, but I understood that somehow how I thought and how I felt was interacting with something, that I was a lot more powerful than I ever thought I was. And it literally changed the entire direction and course of my entire life. I kid you not. That was in 2004, and by 2008, not that everyone has to do this, but I had divorced my husband. I had left the practice of law. I had gone to study at an energy medicine school. I'd spent some time in the jungles of Peru. I had a complete 100% U-turn in my entire life. And in that process, I met another visionary by the name of Dean Taraborelli, who had this vision after a 20-year addiction that he was going to create this place where people could come and not just heal, but become fully recovered. And I'll tell you, I was so inspired, and when he asked me to come help him on this quest, this journey, I couldn't say anything but yes, and I've been here now 13 years doing that with him, along with another, amazing group of people that we work with. So really standing here, Greg, it's like such a deep honor. And you're going to find out as I talk a little bit more tonight that you had yet another big influence and impact on my life 3 years ago that, again, has really shaped why I'm standing here tonight in the talk that I'm going to give you tonight. So it's so interesting. Small, I know. It was a small one, so it was good. Yeah, very grateful for that. Spirit was kind. So this particular conference, I love the title of it, the Self-Empowered Wisdom Conference. And I've been preparing for it and thinking a lot about it. What does that actually mean? What does self-empowered wisdom mean? And the two pieces, the two elements that I really came to was really an embodiment of all of the knowledge, all of the teachings, all of the tools, all of the practices that I've been working and studying the past, 15 years. And also my ability to kind of tap into my inner technology, my abilities to heal. And as I was thinking about that, I'm sure like many of you, in fact, all of you in the audience, I have been diligent in my quest for knowledge. It's been my driving force. It's literally what I do every day. I live this, I live at the sanctuary, I teach this. It's something that consumes me. And so, like all of you, though, I've noticed something very interesting about myself, that I have all of this knowledge, and I've been able to have some real experiences of the knowledge, of the wisdom. But it's often very challenging for me to hold it, to fully embody it, to be able to source from it at the times that I most need it. I go to a lot of conferences. I'm blessed to work with some amazing teachers, and I always come home with a lot of momentum and really feeling wise and feeling empowered. And then with time, it slows a little bit. I might start in training back into some old thoughts, behaviors, and actions. And even more so, what I have found is, although it's really easy for me to feel very empowered and very wise when things are going well, I'm very wise when things are going well. What I've noticed is that wisdom and that sense of empowerment, I lose it when life happens, when dear friends become ill or dear friends even die, when I might be faced with family members that are running up against mental illness and I feel very powerless, when I run up against a cycle of depression that I've had my whole life and I don't know why it's up again, or I run into a sense of real hopelessness or despair when I look at the state of our nation, or the fact that we have people leading countries that are unconscious and unconscionable at times. That for some reason when I hit these places, that it's very hard for me to hold on to my own self-empowered wisdom. And tonight I really want to speak to those of you that might be out there that also are experiencing a little of that. That might even be feeling a little bit of that despair, because it's really hard when we hit this wall, when we're doing everything right. I have to tell you, I'm a religious meditator. I have been for about 12 years. I eat well. I'm very much into organic and non-GMO. I move my body. I do my personal work. I work with a therapist. I get energy work. I teach this stuff. I'm very engaged and immersed in this, as I'm sure a lot of you are. And so when those moments happen that I'm hitting depression or I'm hitting overwhelm, it can be very, very despairing to me. It can feel almost a sense of hopelessness, like this shouldn't be happening. And a lot of times I almost don't want to tell anybody because I know better. I teach this stuff, and I don't want to let anyone down, and I don't want to look like I'm failing. So often I'll hold this in. I won't be sharing it. And I really wanted to come on the stage and really share this with all of you, for those of you that might be possibly experiencing this, or if not you might know somebody that's experiencing this. Because I want to tell you about my own personal journey, about how I navigated my way through this. And it's very interesting. In the last 3 years, I will say I don't think I'm alone in this, and those of you that are feeling it are also not alone in this, because I've noticed a very interesting trend even at the sanctuary for the last 3-4 years. We are a holistic addiction and trauma healing center, so most of the people that come to us are coming for addiction or wanting to really work through underlying core trauma. However, in the last month alone, and again, this is not, this has been happening more and more. We've had 3 clients, 2 in their 20s and 1 in their 60s, that, to be honest with you, probably could come and work for us. They are well-traveled. They've worked with great healers. One's a yogi. They eat well. They've done a tremendous amount of personal work. They're meditators. They've worked with teachers all over the world. And yet they all came to us, not for addiction, not one of them, and not for any deep, deep trauma. They'd already done a lot of that work. but they were up against depression that they weren't sure how to navigate out of, one even to the point of considering suicide. And again, as I mentioned kind of in passing from my own story, in 2017, I too ran up against my wall. You know, I have had depression as a theme in my life, and in 2017, I really came up against it again, and it was unexpected, and it was surprising. And at that time, I was doing everything. You know, I was working with a new therapist, I was going to my energy healers, I even went and did a huge cleanse and a huge fast. I was really working hard on this piece. And it was really very despairing to not know why I was not able to work my way through this. And it was in that moment that I became very humbled and had a deep longing, and I knew that there was a piece missing. Now, I want to make it very clear, I am not saying that all those things that I was doing and that you might be doing aren't vital. I mean, God, what a mess I would have been if I hadn't been doing all of that stuff. But I was, and I'm just saying there was an added element that hadn't been embodied, was not incorporated into my daily practices. And so I got very curious, and I was very open, and as we know, right before, a breakthrough is often a bit of a breakdown. I knew that enough that it didn't frighten me, and I started asking. I asked Spirit, I asked the people I knew I was wanting to know the answer. And as always, when I get to that place of total surrender and humility, the answer always comes. And it was really interesting. The answer that came loud and clear was the sense of self-compassion, Now, I know that self-compassion is like a primary tenet in every wisdom tradition and spiritual teaching. I mean, I've even used the word self-compassion and thought I taught it. And yet, for some reason, I hadn't really heard it, and it hadn't really sunk in, and I certainly wasn't living from that or sourcing from it. So I decided that I was going to put my entire focus on self-compassion. What is it? And I was going to research, and I was going to study, and I was going to find out not only a definition, but how I could practically apply it into my life. And this is where Gregg Braden comes back in, because not surprisingly, he was one of the primary teachers and teachings that I relied on the most heavily. And in fact, I just finished listening to his Science of Self-Empowerment again. It's an amazing book on Audible. You can read it as well, but incredible. But I went back and I really started looking at his work on about the heart, and what we need to do to activate this technology. I was also introduced to some other teachers, to Tara Brach, who is a wonderful teacher and psychotherapist and Buddhist teacher. Just wrote a book called Radical Compassion. I was, of course, listening to Brené Brown and her power of vulnerability that's so incredible, as well as a wonderful researcher, professor out of the University of Texas named Kristen Neff, who's really remarkable in her work in self-compassion. So I dove right in, and I will stand here and tell you without 1 ounce of doubt that I know with every cell of my being that without self-compassion, there is no fertile foundation, there is just nothing solid for any of my practices, any of my awarenesses, any of the tools to really sink in, to grab, to make manifest, to become really entwined and part of my very makeup. I finally understood why all the things I were doing could only take me so far, but they weren't there in the times that I most needed them. So tonight, what I'd like to talk to you about is just my journey into self-compassion. What I found, the definition that I have, the practices that I do. And I guess it's very arrogant to call them mine, because I can tell you I absolutely took them from Gregg's work and Deborah Rosman's work and Heart Math, and they're right out of Tara Brach's work, and I'm grateful for these teachers. But they are sort of my assimilation of it all, and really have a passion of wanting to share that right now. So for self-compassion, as I'm going through it and I'm wanting desperately not to just have a definition of it, self-love, self-forgiveness. I wanted something very tangible and practical. I may not practice law, but I'm still very left-brain focused. I want something really concrete, something that I can follow and something I can use. And I did find, for me, there's 4 key ingredients to self-compassion that have really been life-changing for me. And the first ingredient, I'll tell you what all 4 are, and then we'll go back. The 4 ingredients are belief busting, allowance, curiosity, and nurturing. So now we'll go back. So we'll start with belief busting. And that one was fairly familiar to me. I have been, and at the sanctuary, it's really one of the core principles that we work from, that beliefs are everything. They're just everything. First really became familiar with beliefs with Bruce Lipton's book, Biology of Belief, and Greg Braden's Divine Matrix and Spontaneous Healing of Belief. It changed everything when I realized that what I believe affects how I perceive, and how I perceive makes basically the choices I make in my life. It affects my behavior, the people I choose to be with, the food that I eat, everything. That if I have a belief that I am a disempowered being, that this world is an unsafe place, that there's really no hope, that is absolutely going to be my reality. And being at the sanctuary for the last 13 years now, and working with beliefs, I have realized that underlying all of the disempowering, limiting beliefs that we all may be familiar with, that we work on, unworthiness, unlivability, the world's not safe, abandonment, betrayal, I have found that we all share, at least in the Western culture, and everyone I've ever worked with, and myself included, we all share one really core, fundamental, very insidious, disempowering, limiting belief. It's almost like the mother or the grandmother of all other beliefs. And that's this belief that there's something wrong, that there's just something wrong. This right, wrong, good, bad, either or sense we have that the world and ourselves shouldn't be this way. There's just something wrong. And I'll tell you, this belief is so diabolical that in its very essence, it absolutely undermines and denies and demonizes and pathologizes our entire human experience. From a very, very early age, we're taught we can't even trust our own bodies. They get sick, they die, they smell, they get old. There's always something wrong. We don't ever feel safe in them. We're not comfortable in our own skin. We're taught at a very young age that we can't even trust being human. Whether or not you were raised in a Judeo-Christian religious home, the very worst interpretations of those religions have seeped down into secular society. And that's this general sense that we all have that somehow, we were born in original sin. Like we were already kind of born screwed. We were already born defective, flawed, broken in some way. And I see that almost with everybody, that we have this underlying sense. We've been conditioned to not trust human nature, that we're, survival of the fittest, competition, dog-eat-dog world. I think men are from Mars and women are from Venus, so totally different planets, even though we're really all human on Earth. And it's really sad, the amount of conditioning and programming and beliefs we have of not even trusting this beautiful planet that we live on. It's interesting. It's as though there's a sense that we've been kicked out of the garden, but this isn't the garden. This isn't it. And we see it. I see it, regardless of what your background is. People are praying to get out of here so they can get to heaven so they don't have to be here anymore. A lot of people are meditating so they can kind of meditate up through the chakras out of here. Sedona is really funny. A lot of people, if you've been around at any amount of time, you'll hear people telling you they're waiting for the mothership to go back home because they're not even from here. True story. And we have a lot of people that are really working hard to make sure that their karma's cleaned up. Again, so they don't have to come back here. It's when you stand back, there's something very tragically sad about all that these beliefs about who we are and our very nature have been so undermined to the point that we don't even trust who we are and where we live. And all of this shows up very personally for us. I wish I could say that I've completely been able to annihilate this part of me, but it's not. Whenever something happens that I'm not prepared for or isn't comfortable for me, my first knee-jerk reaction is always, this shouldn't be happening. This is wrong. And I hear it all the time in the work I do. People aren't supposed to have the childhoods they have. There's not supposed to be pain or suffering. People never feel like it's ever enough. The world's letting them down. It's unfair. There's just so many of these beliefs that somehow, something should be different than it is. And I will tell you, this is not a really empowered belief structure to start from. That it's just not an empowered way of even beginning any dialogue or any spiritual transformation or journey. It's really time that we, belief bust that. That we get a different core foundational belief, not that there's something wrong. And I really want to invite you to be open, especially this weekend, because you're going to be getting leading science and information that's actually going to give you a whole different belief system, that maybe something and nothing is wrong, that everything is actually right, that things have been intelligently designed, that we have been intelligently designed, that we are actually on this hero's journey, we're on a soul's quest, and that we have the technology and the tools in order to really be moving through times of evolution and great change. Because I can tell you, that is where our own self-empowerment and wisdom can thrive out of. So for self-empowerment and for self-compassion, the first element, the first key ingredient was belief busting. And the second ingredient, the second component is allowance. It's allowance. It's allowance of the present moment. Acceptance of the present moment. We've all heard that. It's really popular to talk about being present. And it's a lot easier to be present when we've done that first key ingredient of doing a little belief busting, because it's very hard to be present in a moment that we don't trust. So if we actually start changing the narrative a little bit, and it's safe to be present in this moment, we can relax a little bit and be able to actually sit in what is. Now, I'm very aware that being allowing and accepting of the present moment can be very challenging for those of us that might be experiencing a lot of pain or trauma, or if we're witnessing injustice, or if we're witnessing the pain and suffering of other people. It's deeply, deeply painful to be in that place. So I want to make very clear that when I say allowance and acceptance, I am not saying that we condone unethical, unjust, bad behavior, not in the least. I'm not at all saying that we're not absolutely meant to wake up and do something about this and to make changes. Absolutely. What I'm saying is when we start from a place of resistance and not allowance, we are exhausted and we do not have the energy to actually make any change. I mean, think about it. When we're done at the end of the day of pushing and pulling and resisting and being self-righteously upset and angry, by the end of the day, there is no energy left. We've given our power away. We've leaked it all away. We can be consumed by that point with overwhelm, despair. The millennials that come to us, excuse my language, but they call it the existential fuck-its. I really like that. But we can get to that place where it just doesn't matter. And it all comes because we start with giving our power and energy away. We're in that place of resistance and not allowance. And I'm very aware that, coming from that place of allowance takes a tremendous amount of courage. We are not taught or programmed or conditioned to do that. In fact, from the very beginning, we are given the message and taught to avoid pain and suffering at any cost. And I guess for some survival reasons that makes sense, but we're moving beyond just the limbic way of being now. But we really are. From a childhood, we pick up and start learning coping strategies to not feel discomfort, uncomfortable, pain, or suffering in the present moment. We just are. And they can look anything from people-pleasing to overachieving, underachieving, dissociation, fantasy, hiding, bullying, being super good. They can often develop into, of course, substance abuse issues or eating disorders. They can really, even things like, believe it or not, things like spiritual practices, yoga, meditation, fasting, cleansing, never-ending cycle of doing more personal work. They can all be coping strategies to help us not be in the present moment. So for the purpose of this conversation and the exploration into self-compassion, the coping strategy is really not the focus, what we're choosing to do, whether it's healthy, unhealthy, right, wrong, good, or bad. It's really about the intention behind the coping strategy. And only we know that. We know if we're drinking a glass of wine because it's helping us relax and we're enjoying the company in a meal, or if we're drinking a glass of wine and it's a bottle of wine and it's 2 bottles of wine because we're just wanting to numb something out. And we know if we're doing our yoga and meditation in order to ground in and to feel our heart center and to be fully embodied, or if we're doing it just to escape, again, feeling uncomfortable or feeling pain. And I really want to stress right now, no judgment on the coping strategy. I think they save us. Sometimes we're not ready to go into pain and trauma. So I really want to make that clear. I often say that we really want to honor our coping strategies. They keep us alive until we're ready to do the work. However, when we continue for too long to deny, minimize, suppress, repress, shun, disown, ignore, hide what we're feeling, whatever that is, eventually we shut down. And eventually, especially for people here, we are not waking up. We are not making that evolutionary leap. At some point, if we want to be taking this journey that we need to be taking right now, we're going to need to be able to be comfortable in our pain. And that's the great paradox. The more we avoid the pain, the more we experience the pain. Psychoanalyst Carl Jung said it great. What we resist persists. And the Tibetan teacher Pema Chodron always says, pain's not going anywhere till it's taught you exactly what you need to learn. And then I was just, it's funny, talk about synchronicity. I just got in my Facebook feed today this great quote by Rumi, Sufi poet Rumi, that said, don't turn away. Look at the bandaged places. That's where the light shines in. And I thought, that's so beautiful, especially for the talk tonight. So it is something that we eventually need to be able to do, but I want to let everyone know this isn't something we do alone. Okay, this isn't something we do alone, especially for those of you that have experienced a lot of trauma and have a lot of wounding. You absolutely need to go on this journey gently and sweetly and tenderly with a lot of support. It's something that we do together. It's part of this beautiful journey that we're all on. So we've talked about belief busting, and we've talked about allowance of the present moment. And the third ingredient to self-compassion that I want to talk about is curiosity. Curiosity. And it's really interesting. I have found in the last 3 years, the more comfortable I became in sitting in my own pain, and also my awareness of my coping strategies, that they held a wealth of information. I just hadn't sat still long enough to actually hear it or see it. Those of you that do meditate are probably really familiar that you're in a really good meditation when your mind is going absolutely insane, and all of a sudden I was able to firsthand witness the war that was going on within myself, and I started to see how this internal war I was projecting out into the external world. I was able to, Tara Brach talks about this really beautifully, that I was able to fully see and feel what the trance of unworthiness is like. what it felt like in my body to always have this sense that something's not okay. I was able to find those places in me of unmet needs. I was able to see my dark and my light. I was able to reconnect, or maybe for the first time really meet my higher self or authentic self, my future self. Dean always talks about being quiet enough to hear our soul song, and I think I started to hear my soul song. It was a really profound experience. And the most amazing thing happened after sitting with myself and being in this place of curiosity. What happened was this magical experience of alchemy happened, where some of the most deepest, darkest, shameful places of myself that I had been ignoring for so long actually began to change form. They became these huge resources and sources of strength and wisdom and beauty that I didn't know was possible. And I always use this example at the sanctuary when I share this, and that's of Dean. Dean had a pretty bad drug addiction for over 20 years, and it was a source of tremendous shame for him. For him personally, for his family, he carried this burden, but he was determined to transmute this. And so he went on a real journey of the soul through traveling and working with teachers. And out of his deepest, darkest, ugliest moments, his secrets, came the sanctuary. Came this amazing place that had never been created ever before, a place where people could come and truly find, remember, know who they really are. And I guess even out of my own shame, of I was sexually abused my entire childhood up until my teens. I left home, ran away from home, ended up having really a horrible eating disorder and body image issues and depression throughout my 20s, 30s, more depression, betrayal, a divorce, all of which, though, ended up opening me up to the spiritual awakening that I shared that happened in my 40s, that are now continuing in my 50s, so that now I'm able to sit with people in their most darkest hours, and hold the space, the loving space for them, so that they too can have the same healing and awareness that I've had. So really important, as we're belief busting and we're allowing and accepting the present moment, that we get really curious about what the present moment has to tell us. And then the very final key ingredient to self-compassion was nurturing. And this was right out of Tara Brach's work. She does something called the Rein of Self-Compassion. It's her in nurturing. And it's the sweetest thing. It's so funny. It's so simple. And it's the one thing I never got, ever, in any of my spiritual practices. When I'd go do my personal work, it was like I was diving in for the kill. I'm going to go slay those dragons, and I'm going to overcome the ego, and I'm going to really fix everything that's wrong with me so I can actually start living this life I wanted. And this whole notion of nurturing is completely the opposite. I found there was nothing to slay, that these dragons have actually been my protectors of this vulnerable, precious part of me that was really about going in and befriending and embracing these dragons so that they would calm down enough that I could then have access and be able to connect into those beautiful, sweet, precious, vulnerable parts of me. The parts of me that had been really hidden for so long. And to be able to go and, once I make contact, to really hold those parts of me as I would hold a lover or my four-legged animals or a dear friend, and really hold it in such a way to start connecting with it, dialoguing with it, finding out, what does it need? What do you need? How can I best serve you? How can I most help? And I love Tara Brach often says when she does this dialogue, that part says, I want the gentle touch on the brow, and she'll often tell that part, it's okay, sweetheart. And Thich Nhat Hanh says, darling, I care about the suffering. I really love that. Often I'll put my hand on my heart, and for me it's often just reassurance, and letting myself know it's okay, and forgiven. I did the best I could. It's enough. I have another friend that does the Ho'oponopono prayer. It's so beautiful. I love you. thank you, I forgive you, I'm sorry. Really being able to go into these places and offer ourselves this deep, deep nourishment. And it's really amazing what started to happen, because I was going through this process of self-compassion, and I remember sitting in my office one day with my hand on my heart, and all of a sudden I realized what had happened, what had developed out of this practice, and I was really able to feel my awakened heart. I felt my awakened heart. It was a deeply moving moment for me. And I understood that, I wasn't able to access my awakened heart without starting to change my beliefs, without recognizing that I'm a remarkable person, that we're remarkable people, and that I was able to actually allow how I was feeling, all of it, the dark and the light, that all parts of me were welcome. That I became interested in all the parts, that they all had something to share. They all had information, the dark and the light. And that I could finally go in and learn to love those parts. And I will tell you that for me personally, practically, what this looked like was all of a sudden my internal world, my internal space became vast. I have to be honest with you, I still have bouts of depression. I still get sad when I find friends are sick or friends die. I still get disheartened by some of the things in the world. I just do. In fact, I may even feel it more poignantly than ever now. The difference for me is this vast container I have, there's space for it. There's a place for it. It too belongs, and I can be there, and I can love on it. But I also am really clear that I don't have to be taken down by it. It doesn't have to consume me. That I am able to still both and have these feelings, but still get up and be grateful and function in my life. So I just really want to share tonight with you. We're so fortunate to be with Greg and Deborah and Joe earlier, because that's exactly what he's going to be sharing with you. Talk about belief busting, the new narrative, the true narrative, that he is truly going to be showing us, along with HeartMath, the tools to activate our inner technology, to learn about heart coherence, to have that awakened heart. And we need that going forward, because this is a remarkable times that we're in, but it's going to require that we're present and engaged and willing to go to those places that might seem a little scary that we need to go to. So thank you so much. I appreciate this.